What is going on, Cultivate family? I hope you are having a good week wherever it is that you're listening to this from. It is Friday. It's 20 degrees Celsius, which is about as good as it gets for the UK, isn't it really? Apart from that time where we really had a heat wave. But for any Fahrenheit people, I think that's about 68 Fahrenheit. So I'm enjoying the sun and I'm hoping it sticks around because I've got my 10k race this weekend. It's going to be the first 10k I've run. Fingers crossed, touch wood. I hope I haven't jinxed it since breaking my ankle. So it's going to feel like a nice benchmark if I can get it in the bag. And I'm a bit of a weirdo in the way that I love running in hot weather. Hate being cold, love being warm and toasty. So yeah, wish me luck if you listen to this before the 23rd of June 2024. Today we're going to talk about training to muscle failure. Should we do it and how often? And this is something I get asked a lot, as especially on social media at the moment, there is a big focus on always training to failure, doing things like partial reps, completely maxing yourself out every session. And I just wanted to do an episode to serve as a resource for all of my listeners and for my clients of what the evidence is actually saying as of now and what we know and what best practice could be going forward for those of us that aren't necessarily like professional athletes or bodybuilders. So to begin with, I want to talk about something called the effective reps theory. And you may have heard this before, you may not have. The effective reps theory is the idea that the closer a rep is to failure, the more effective that rep is at building muscle. So, if you do 12 reps of a leg press, and the closer you get to failure, those last 4 reps might specifically be way more effective at building muscle and contributing to overall muscle growth than the 8 reps that you did before that. Now, the questions I guess a lot of the studies that have been done over the last few years have been asking is how often should we train to failure? Is every rep we do equally benefiting our muscle growth? And which reps specifically are better at promoting hypertrophy, and does this depend on the exercise? And when I say hypertrophy, that's just me referring to size of the muscle. So without boring you with loads and loads of research, I will just say that there was one study that showed the effective reps theory did have some substance behind it. And it also showed that things like cluster sets, when used super close to failure, can be really handy to utilize within your sessions when you do them safely. That can actually be super effective within our training. Now, cluster sets are something that I use a lot in my own training, and it's something that I also use a lot with my one-to-one clients to build volume with a movement at a challenging weight. So an example here would be if you are really struggling with a movement like an overhead barbell press. It's a hard movement to build volume in, and you keep getting stuck at, say, 25 kilograms for 8 reps. We might choose to break that down into 3 cluster sets of 3. So that means you do 3 reps, pause for 10 or so seconds, do 3 more, pause, do 3 more, then have your main rest period and do it again for the number of programmed sets. And what this means is that we just break the reps down, but we still build the same amount of volume in that movement, which is then really handy for slowly pushing those numbers up once we've gotten stuck at a certain weight. Give you some context on how I've used these in my own training. This time last year, I could barely bench press 1 rep at 40 kilograms. And using cluster sets, I've now built up to the point where I can do 5 reps at 43 kilograms. And building up that volume over time in clusters, working super, super close to failure, but having those short breaks of rest have allowed me to amount that volume over time, which has resulted in my strength in that movement absolutely soaring with decent progressive overload each week and smart programming. So I'm definitely a big fan of using cluster sets, or some people refer to them as pause, rest, repeat sets. So when we take the idea of cluster sets and we measure them up against continuous sets, there was a study that delved into this, and they compared a lat pull down with continuous reps to failure and cluster sets close to failure. And the group doing the continuous reps actually had 12% more muscle growth, whereas the people doing cluster sets only had 4%. And what this kind of proves is that there is effectiveness to both methods, training close to failure, but the continuous reps did come out on top for someone that was able to maintain them all the way to failure. But obviously, not everyone can do that with every movement all of the time. So it's quite subjective. So let's now talk about what working to true failure is. So working to complete muscle failure means you literally cannot move that weight anymore if you tried. Your muscles are completely maxed out, depleted, and they can't do anything else. So for example, if you went to complete failure on a bicep curl, at the bottom of the rep, you would no longer be able to move that weight no matter how hard you tried. That's what we're talking about when we refer to true failure. So stopping short of true failure is still very challenging, but you're just not completely going all the way maxed out. So bearing in mind that working very close to true failure is still going to be really challenging and really taxing for you, it has also been brought up that there's almost a law of diminishing return when you're working all the way to failure. So if, for example, you did a lat pull down for 15 reps, and by the time you'd finished that set, you were about 6 to 7 reps away from muscle failure. Pushing yourself to work closer to 2 to 3 reps away from failure is going to be far more beneficial than working 6 to 7 reps away, because those final reps are going to be far closer to muscle failure than the previous set. But then if you're working at 2 to 3 reps away from complete muscle failure and you push that to 1 to 2 reps before failure, the gains that you're going to get from that are a bit more marginal. So bearing that in mind, it does mean we don't necessarily have to push ourselves to true failure every single time, depending on what type of programming we do, what our goals are, how often we train a week, and what we've got going on in our lives that we need to recover for around that. And then finally, a study came out saying that the last few reps prior to failure may actually matter less than a lot of people think. And it actually showed better muscle hypertrophy in a test group that didn't work to true failure. So to summarize that for you, we've basically got 3 recent studies supporting that training to failure is better. And we've got 4 suggesting that there's no difference stopping a little bit shorter of failure. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because a lot of people are pushing training to failure, but it's going to be so person specific. And again, as I often say, not all of us are professional bodybuilders or have aspirations to be, and not all of us are athletes or have aspirations to be. And when I now apply this to how I work with people and what I do, I don't necessarily train professional athletes. I train people that are very driven and do a lot of comps, and I train people that work out more for long-term health. The bulk of my people that I work with want to get strong, want to feel awesome in their bodies, and they want to push themselves and have fun with their fitness. So when I start working with someone on a one-to-one basis, I put a lot of effort into ensuring that all of my clients know how to read and gauge intensity in their workouts, especially with how I program for them. So we spend a fair chunk of time trying to gauge intensities of their sets, and we use 2 different measures of this. The first is reps in reserve, and the second is rate of perceived exertion. Now, with any new person that signs up to working with me, we don't start too hot out the gate because we want to account for recovery and muscle soreness. So we'll tend to work with about 3 or 4 reps in the tank after every set as a benchmark and a foundation that we build off in the future. With anyone that I actually work with that's recovering from like top surgery or maybe coming back from an injury, it's really important that the focus at the beginning is actually more on mobilizing the joints and moving pain and discomfort free before we start to build strength. So often we won't go anywhere close to failure for weeks and weeks until they are ready to and they are feeling like they are moving pain and discomfort free. Now, with my superhuman plan, the beginner plan eases you into all this because obviously I'm not there with you one-to-one. We actually just work on reps and weights in the beginner program. And then in the intermediate plan, we start to tie in things like gauging intensity, because learning that all at once when you're first starting to lift can be really, really overwhelming. And so I think it's pretty important that we ease people into that and not try and make them think about too much. And that's what I spend a lot of time doing with my one-to-one people as well. And I think This is why having a one-to-one coach, if you have the means, is so awesome, because you have someone to coach and program the intensities for you. So you don't have to question whether you should be working to muscle failure, and you don't have to worry that you might end up overtraining or not training hard enough. And you can just spend your time building that mind-muscle connection and the awareness of your own body. So to finish off with, for anyone that doesn't actually work with me or use any of my superhuman programs, I wanted to just lay out some simple rules of thumb for anyone that might be struggling to know how close to failure they need to work, or how to actually get some intensity into their working sets. So to begin with, training and leaving a couple of reps in the tank instead of going to absolute failure is still going to be beneficial. And using reps in reserve or rate of perceived exertion, so RIR or RPE, to gauge the intensity can be really, really helpful. Going to failure on your big compound movements like your squats, your deadlifts, if you can do it safely, can be really, really beneficial to kind of test where your strength is at. But we don't necessarily want to be doing that every week, because essentially you're just going to absolutely knacker yourself. And if you have a job and a life, maybe that's not a good priority for you. So occasionally with my clients, we might test the big lifts and work really close to failure. So 0 to 1 reps in the tank. But not often. It might be anywhere between every 6 weeks. It might be every 4 to 5 weeks, depending on how quickly they progress with their movements. Now, for people that are looking to really build volume, maybe a lot of my transmask folk that really want to work on their arms, their shoulders, if you are going to do massive drop sets of your isolated muscle groups, you want to make sure you are going almost to failure so they're actually productive. We don't necessarily want to smash out 25 rep sets and finish them and you're still super, super far away from muscle failure. That's not going to do anything for you. So be smart about it. Generally staying 1 to 3 reps shy of failure to prioritize lifting safely, your training volume and recovery should still feel really difficult and challenging for you. 1 to 3 reps in the tank should never feel easy, and it may take a while for you to gauge that, and that's okay. It comes with repetition. And then using cluster sets and drop sets, they can be used well if they're programmed smartly, for sure, but just make sure that you follow a program or you work with a coach if you're not sure where to start with that. And the last thing I want to leave you with is gauging your own intensity, your own failure, what your work capacity is really, really important. It's a big part of working out, but it does take time. So knowing what your true failure is, it's just a case of doing the reps and learning from every workout. And it might be that if you push yourself super hard in a session and that just wipes you out for the whole week, you know that you could probably stay a couple of reps away from that next week if you want to recover in time to hit all your other workouts. It's very much a learning curve, and I really hope this quick episode has given you a bit of food for thought about how close are you working to failure? Can you push a bit more? Are you maybe pushing too hard? And is it worth you thinking about reps in reserve or RPE a little more in your workouts if I don't coach you already and I'm not making you think about it in your workouts? So any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me in the DMs on Instagram or TikTok, because gauging intensity can be really hard and knowing where your failure is isn't always obvious, especially at the beginning of your journey. So have an amazing rest of your week, Cultivate family. Wish me luck in my 10K this weekend, and I'll speak to you next week. Take it easy. That's me out. Bye.